Today, we're going to dive into some of the most pressing financial topics. We're going to be talking about Doge dividends, stimulus refund checks, Social Security, Fort Knox. And I'm thrilled to have Kevin Demerit, CEO of Lear Capital, on with me again today. Kevin is a renowned expert in precious metals with decades of experience in investment strategies. So today, he's going to be sharing with us some insight on how precious metals can offer some stability and security, especially in uncertain times like we're facing right now, involving Social Security, bank policies, government refunds. So we're going to dive right in. So first off, just want to say, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Steve. It's always a pleasure.
So first off, I want to dive in with the recent discussions about the Department of Government Efficiency, the Doge, and the refund checks. This is like huge. A lot of people want to know what's going to be happening. We just saw the reconciliation bill go through, and now they're drafting up the different line items. How might changes in government disbursements like this affect the market for precious metals?
That's a great question. We've got these so-called Doge refund checks. And the way that I read it so far is it's meant to return about 20% of the wasteful spending in government back to the people. And to me, this is really a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. And the reason I say that is that a $500, $1,500, $2,500 check, might help with a few months of rising grocery and energy bill costs. Maybe it's 6 months, but it doesn't fix the cost of living crisis that we're in. Because the real problem is every time the government hands out money like this, it fuels inflation. It's exactly the same thing that happened in COVID. We've seen this happen over and over with these stimulus checks, and inflation immediately spikes up right afterward. So that's why you saw the price of gold just absolutely skyrocket. So if gold's going to thrive in this kind of environment, then I think I'm sitting in the right position, and anybody invested is probably in the right position. But if you look back when they were giving out the stimulus checks in COVID, gold just went through the roof. So you can't print gold. So if you have an increased demand on a fixed supply because you've printed up the money, then what happens to the gold price? Typically goes up, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen this time again.
They're saying if Doge hits its mark of $2 trillion in clawbacks, then essentially it would be a $5,000 check to each household. $5,000 goes out, and then as people use that money, and I've heard speculation that, maybe people will save it or they'll pay down debt. But a lot of people are saying we're probably going to use that money right away. That's going to speed up the cycle of the funds, and then it's going to be inflationary. And that is what you're saying causes gold to go up. Is that also the same for silver and other precious metals too?
Yeah, basically the same. Look, you can't print gold and silver. So when you're printing money, and the definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. If you dole out a $5,000 check to everybody in the United States, 90% of the people are going to go spend it. Some of those people have to spend it, and some of the other people say, hey, this is fantastic. I just got a free check. I'm going to go spend that money. Too much money chasing too few goods. Look what happened in COVID. Gold was trading right around $1,250, $1,300 an ounce, went to $2,000 an ounce. The price of oil and everything else, eggs and energy and all essential items, just absolutely went through the roof. We're starting to get it under control, but they're still very high. You're going to see that same thing happen. But where I think people are, when they think about this check potentially coming, it isn't we're going to save $2 trillion in an instant. It's $2 trillion, if I had to guess, over the next 2 or 3 years. So you're going to get a check for 500, you're going to get a check for 1,500, you're going to get a check for 2,500, and that just is going to continually drive up the prices of the things that most of us need on a monthly basis. And when you look back, you're going to wish it never happened. That's just my personal opinion.
Wow.
But if you look back when we've got stimulus checks in the past, it's been that way throughout history. It moves prices up, and they don't come back down.
Yeah, I actually heard, I think it was Mike Johnson respond to this. They were asking him at CPAC, and he had said, as, fiscal conservative, I feel that we need to work on our national debt, which, I can't remember what it's at now. It's like approaching 40 trillion. And I heard Elon Musk say, like, this is an existential threat. If we don't take care of this, it's going to be a disaster. And so I think, like, them trying to tackle it is great. But yeah, you bring up that good point, is that, like, and he even said it, he's like, putting a check in people's pockets will be nice. It's going to be great for the politics. But what does this do for our nation, for our debt, for our economy? And he's like saying, he said that he wasn't necessarily on board. Like, he felt like we got to take care of this. What are your thoughts also on that with the national debt?
Yeah, another great question. Look, if you're going to save $2 trillion and we're printing $1 trillion just for the interest payment on the debt we already have, you gotta figure out how to get that number down. If you look at Social Security and you look at Medicare and Medicaid, that's the biggest part of our budget. It's the biggest cost. You drop down a few and you've got $800 billion for defense spending. In the middle, which never used to be anywhere near, is the interest payment on debt. I can pull back spending on Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. I can find some things to do there to pull back the spending there. I can drop defense spending from $800 billion to maybe $500 billion, and you're probably going to be okay for a little while. There's nothing you can do with interest payments. Your interest payments are your interest payments. If you don't pay them, the national debt goes default, our dollar goes to zero, inflation goes through the roof, interest rates go through the roof because we couldn't borrow money. A lot of bad things happen if you don't pay the interest on the national debt. So how do you get that interest payment down? Well, you pay down the debt. Take $2 trillion, pay down the debt, and continue to pay down the debt each and every year until we get our budget, our interest payment on the deficit down to $300 billion or $500 billion. That's a reasonable amount of interest to pay. $1 trillion is too much. It's going to, in the next 5 or 10 years, it could become the biggest line item in our entire budget. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, and you mentioned Social Security, which actually I had heard Elon Musk say that what they're, he's saying that they're discovering a lot of mismanagement, and he's outright saying, like, fraud and all this stuff. He's saying it's going to be the biggest thing you've ever seen in history. So they're saying there's going to be a lot going on there, and a lot of my viewers are really interested in Social Security. And I wanted to ask you as well, like, with all the changes that are taking place, we've got, as you mentioned, we've got Social Security taking up a huge chunk of spending, and we're hearing that there's going to be a solvency issue with that coming up as well. And people are hoping for, Elon Musk is hinting at, he said he's optimistic that we might actually be able to do a Doge dividend refund check for Social Security. But there's a lot going on there. And my thought is as well, like, for those people that are on Social Security and they're experiencing all of this chaos circulating around it, it's in the forefront of the news everywhere right now. What would investing in precious metals like gold and silver offer in the form of additional security for those that are, on these fixed income benefits as they face these issues?
Well, if we're honest, Social Security is on life support. It's set to run dry, I think, by 2033 it is, which is, 8 years from now. So even if the government and Elon and everybody working on this situation finds some of the hundreds of billions of dollars needed to fix Social Security, the most likely solution, in my opinion, will either be one of two things. You raise the retirement age, which we've done 2 times in the past, or you cut some of the benefits. So you've got that situation going on with Social Security. On top of that, you have inflation eating away at the purchasing power of every Social Security check that they're sending out. And they have something called the cost of living adjustment. And that cost of living adjustment each year, where they look at inflation and they say, okay, how much are we going to increase the check amount for the people who are receiving the Social Security checks, so they keep ahead of the rate of inflation? Well, those cost of living adjustments, Steve, have never been enough to offset real inflation, especially when it comes to food and energy. So when you look at gold, gold is the one asset that has historically preserved wealth during times of inflation. It's got a 90% correlation with inflation, meaning that when the cost of good rise or the cost of living rises, so does the value of the gold. So if anybody's relying on Social Security and you're not diversifying into hard assets like gold or silver, and there's other hard assets, real estate, so on and so forth, that you can take a look at, then you're leaving your future at the mercy of a system that's already on borrowed time. That's where I think the concern is that Social Security has gone past the point of no return. It's either, like I said, cutting benefits, raising the retirement age, um, or something worse. But I don't think they're going to find enough money to kind of fix Social Security at this particular point.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty scary to think about where it's at right now, and all the stuff that Elon Musk is claiming is going on. I mean, I saw something in the news where he was saying, like, apparently, according to the Social Security Administration records, there's somebody that's 360 years old or something. That I heard Donald Trump say in his State of the Union address. There's somebody collecting Social Security that's 100 years older than the United States of America.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, I think the government's wrought with fraud and incompetency. So I think you get somebody in there to fix some of it. There's billions of dollars that could be saved. It's just Social Security is so big. I really, it would be a miracle to kind of fix it in a way that would put it back on the standing that it had 20 years ago or even 30 years ago. I think that's the bigger problem. Where do you find enough money to kind of keep the retirement age the same or the Social Security age about the same, and make sure that it's going to be there when we get there or our kids get there?
I think you nailed it. Like, the current system is on life support. There's got to be some massive major changes, and I don't know. We'll see where we go from here, and we've only got a limited amount of time on it as well. Like you said, I think it's like the next 8 to 12 years, I guess, depending on the CPI or the cost of living adjustments every year, depending on how much they got to dole out to keep up with inflation they're claiming, which, as you mentioned, it falls short every year. I mean, we're going to be running out of money here soon, so we'll see. I mean, they got to do something and soon, because we don't got much time left for Social Security. I wanted to ask you something else too, and that is, this has gotten a lot of attention recently. It's a fascinating topic that's caught a lot of people's attention. The audit at Fort Knox. So, what's your take on, and how could you confirm the gold reserves are going to be impacting investors' confidence in precious metals?
Yeah, this is right to the heart of obviously what we do here at Lear. And Fort Knox has not been audited since 1974, I think it is. And basically, they weren't even really audited. They just had some House of Representatives or Congress people and some press, and just kind of walk through and look at the gold. That's not an audit. So, Steve, if it turns out that Fort Knox gold reserves are a sham, whether through missing gold or fake bars or exaggerated inventories, I think the consequences for the US dollar would be absolutely catastrophic. The,
Wow.
the, the entire foundation of the dollar's perceived value rests on the full faith and credit of the US government. Well, the full faith part of that equation would be completely destroyed. So when you think about that, then what happens if that collapses? You have a complete collapse in a dollar confidence. So the US dollar is a fiat currency. It has no intrinsic value other than the trust people actually place in it. And if it's revealed that the government has been lying about those gold reserves, that trust that you have there would shatter absolutely overnight, and you would see a big jump in inflation as investors and foreign governments kind of sold the dollar, saying, "Look, I've got no trust or no faith in the U.S. dollar." So that would be the first thing that would absolutely happen. Secondly, I think you'd have foreign governments also dumping U.S. treasuries. So countries around the world hold massive amounts of U.S. debt, and if they suddenly woke up and found that the U.S. government has been operating under this fraudulent financial claim that X amount of 3,200 tons of gold, backed whatever it's going to back, and it isn't there, you would start to see a sell-off of U.S. bonds in mass. And I think the treasury market would have a big problem, and interest rates would absolutely skyrocket. From a gold standpoint, you just get a massive spike in gold, because it would expose the Federal Reserve's manipulation of the gold market. And the physical gold owners would become the ultimate winners, because if you found that the gold that you thought was in storage had already been sold on the market, then there isn't that gold there anymore. That supply couldn't come onto the market, and the gold price would go up. The big losers would be the paper dollar holders, because everybody's selling off the paper and probably moving over to something that they can trust. But what we have done, this is such an interesting topic, Steve, that we wrote a full report on this Fort Knox issue and what could potentially happen with foreign governments and the dollar, interest rates, and the price of gold. And we're happy to give that away to your listeners free of charge. I mean, we've been charging other people for it, some of the institutional people and everything. But if you wanted to give that away, we're happy to give it away for your listeners. I know you do a great job with this education. We'd like to be a part of it, so we're happy to do that.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to include that down below in the description. Thank you so much for offering that, because yeah, I've actually heard a lot of people say that, like everyone's coming out and saying, what if there's no gold in there? Like, and Elon Musk, I actually heard him say that he's planning on, or he's proposing this, actually doing a live stream where he is going to live stream walking through Fort Knox and let everybody see whether or not the gold is there. So I mean, we're gonna find out soon, is what they're saying. So that's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, and it's not just walking through, because look, you could have missing gold bars. First of all, you need to count each and every one of them and say, okay, well, we just walked through an X amount of missing. I don't think you're going to walk in and say, hey, it's here or not here. You could have the quality of the gold not be what it's supposed to be. And this has happened around the world numerous times, even with governments where they had gold in the central bank, and they went to assay that gold and find out the quality of that gold, and they found that there was lead in there was copper, and so on and so forth. That wasn't pure gold, so that the amount of gold really isn't there. The other things that central banks do that people need to understand is that they lease the gold out, typically to mining companies, who then produce the gold and then give that gold back. So it's rehypothecation is really what it's called. It's just a big dumb word for saying that, hey, look, I have it on my balance sheet, but I've also leased it out to this person, and I may have leased it out to this person, and at some point I'm going to give it back, or I think I'm going to get it back. So when you're walking around Fort Knox, if they have done that, like other central banks do around the world, then the gold might not actually all be in Fort Knox. First of all, there's 3 different depositories the gold is supposed to be in, but some of that gold, if it was leased out, could be in other places. And one of the reasons that we're starting to see a bunch of gold coming back into the United States is maybe the people who leased that gold need to replace it and have it within their vault, so that you can go to see in their vault, yes, it's there, we leased it to you, and now it's back. So there's this whole Fort Knox thing is a little bit more complicated than people, I think, are understanding. It's just not sitting there waiting for somebody to go in and shine a flashlight on it with a camera. It could be in different places, and it could be in different quality. So we need to really do an audit that makes sense, so that we feel comfortable with the end result.
It's going to be really interesting to see this unfold. I'm definitely going to be following it, because I'm curious to see what happens.
The most interesting part about this, I'm not the biggest conspiracy guy in the whole world. So I'm sitting here and I said, okay, they're going to go look at the gold in Fort Knox. And then immediately after that, what we saw was Switzerland sends over 162 metric tons of gold back into the United States. That's a huge amount of gold to come into the United States. And there's article after article, people can Google it, talking about Europe, specifically Great Britain, delivering metric tons of gold back into the United States. So where is this gold going? It's not your next door neighbor purchasing 162 metric tons of gold. It's billions and billions of dollars. It's got to be an extremely large hedge fund. It's got to be some sort of central bank, one of the largest banks in the world. Maybe 5% of the people here in the United States, not people, but organizations, banks, and depositories, so on and so forth, could even afford that much gold. So it is very interesting to see how much physical gold's coming in the United States. We have not seen this much gold delivered in the United States for over 13 years. So it's got a lot of people scratching their heads wondering what's going on here.
Because they know the audit's coming and they're trying to get...
I don't know, but like I said, if people Google it, they will find that the amount of gold is literally billions of dollars. This isn't because of your next door neighbor, you and I purchasing gold. It's a lot more gold than typically comes into the United States by a magnitude of 8 to 10 in a single month. And this has been going on for 2 months now. So something's going on. I can't nobody can put their finger on it, but I hope they do, and we finally get the right answers here.
All right, you mentioned inflation quite a bit, and inflation remains a significant concern, especially with retirees. Could you just kind of dive into some of the basics and explain why it is that gold and silver are often seen as hedges against inflation?
Yeah, well, so everybody I think understands inflation. It's again too much money chasing too few goods is the general description of inflation, and it's this silent thief. It just kind of slowly erodes the value of your money year after year. Then you compare it to gold, that throughout history has been one of the assets that's been able to maintain purchasing power. It's basically the same value if you looked at it from 5,000 years ago. So it's pretty good at kind of holding its value, especially when we moved over to paper currency, because then you could print paper currency if you didn't have gold backing it, and that's going to drive up the inflation rate faster, but it's also going to drive up the purchasing power of gold. And there's a very easy equation to think about for the reason that this happens. The government can't print gold. So if they can't print gold and you're printing up something that's like money, paper dollars, right? Real money used to be gold, and now you're printing up paper money that you've convinced people is money, then that money is going to buy these tangible assets, real estate, precious metals, so on and so forth. And if you put an increased demand on a fixed supply, what happens to price? Over time, it's just going to keep going up and up and up and up. So if you look at the prices of gold from the early 1900s up to 1974, when we went off the gold standard, meaning that a dollar bill was backed by some portion of gold. If you think about the printing of paper money at that point, every time I printed up some paper money, I had to back it with some gold. In 1974, they said, okay, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to print up paper money at whatever rate we want to print it up ourselves. And so we went off the gold standard, and they can print money willy-nilly as much as they want. If you're doing that, the inflation rate's going to go up at a higher pace. What have they done to the inflation rate or the equation to give us the inflation rate? They've manipulated it 100 times since 1974, continually to make it harder and harder for the inflation rate to increase. But if you go back 10 years and you use the equation that the government used to use to measure inflation, the inflation rate would be more like 7 or 8% today. And if you look at the price of gold, it isn't increasing at 2.5 or 3%, which is the rate of inflation. It's been increasing at the rate of 8, 9% per year for the past 15 years. And so it's doing its job. If you're concerned with inflation, or better yet, if you're concerned that the government is going to continue to print money over the next 10 or 15 years and you want to retire, then you should own some tangible assets. Gold and silver is being one of the options, but real estate, and there's other tangible assets that are great inflationary hedges as well. So diversify and get yourself prepared for the government, potentially printing up more money. And it's hard not to print up money. Okay. Matter of fact, it's impossible not to print money. So if you understand that, then you understand you want something that's going to be an inflationary hedge.
This week, one of the big things that has come up that has caused a lot of people to be concerned about inflation has been the tariffs. We're hearing that they're officially being enacted as of this week. Mexico and Canada, I think it was like 25% tariffs. China, it went up from 10% to 20%. What do you think are going to be the effects of that as well with inflation and precious metals with that? Because I know I've seen that everywhere right now. Tariffs. It's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, Warren Buffett came out and said, look, tariffs are inflationary, period. Somebody has to pay the tax. And he literally said it, and it's not the tooth fairy. And that is correct. The issue, the challenge that the United States government has had is that a lot of different countries have used tariffs against us, placed tariffs on us, and we haven't placed tariffs back on them. Or they sent a bunch of goods over to the United States and then wouldn't consume goods that we would send back over to them. So are tariffs the right thing to do? Probably. But you needed someone with enough clout and and conviction to do this, and Trump has been the only person with the nerve to kind of fight back with these countries. So short term, you're going to get inflation, you're going to get volatility, 100%. Long term, I think it's positive because we will be trading with these countries at a much more level playing field. But every time we tax imports, if you go back and look at history, it raises the cost of goods to businesses. Businesses pass them on to the consumer, and it's going to be mean more expensive goods, for all of us. What I think is more alarming is that China and Russia have been stockpiling precious metals like never before, because I think in anticipation of these tariffs and the inflationary effect that they will probably have around the world, quite frankly, because we increase our tariffs, they increase their tariffs pretty soon. The real loser are people in those countries, because prices are going to go up through the roof. So these central banks have been accumulating precious metals, I think, in anticipation of a trade war potentially happening. Again, do I think it's a good idea? I really do, because I think we can level the playing field at some point. Short-term inflation and volatility, long-term you get a better trade structure with the United States.
Yeah. And it looks like this is, just from what I've been reading this week, it looks like this is the direction that we're going. I know that they had paused, the Mexico-Canada one for about a month, but now they're saying it's on. And Canada was on there saying, like, we're going to shut off like our electrical imports, exports to the United States. Mexico, I haven't seen too many headlines on what it is they're proposing, but they're saying like, okay, game on, we're going to do the trade war. And then China yesterday came out and said that they're prepared for any type of war. Like, they got very aggressive with it. Like, so I'm just like, all right, this looks like it's the direction we're going. So it's good to know what's going to be happening with inflation and tariffs, because it looks like that's the future. Now, for those that are looking to diversify their retirement portfolios, let's kind of shift gears. How can they use their 401k or their IRA to invest in precious metals through Lear Capital?
Yeah, great question. I don't think a lot of people realize, but you can legally roll over your 401k or IRA or any portion of it, into a physical gold and silver IRA. It's called the Precious Metals IRA. And it allows those people to hold real, tangible, physical gold in a retirement account while still enjoying the tax advantages of an IRA. So at Lear Capital, we handle the entire process for you. It takes you about 5 minutes to fill out the paperwork, and then we help move your funds from where they are now to a precious metals IRA in an IRS approved depository, and then ensure that your retirement is protected from inflation and volatility from there. So you're actually holding the physical metal there. And if you ever wanted to take that physical metal in your possession, the company we work with actually allows you to do that. So again, I know I just gave away another report on Fort Knox, but we have a free gold IRA guide as well, and happy to send that along to anybody who might want to take a look at moving some portion of their IRA or 401k over to precious metals. Happy to get that free report out to them as well.
Very cool. Thank you. Yeah, I will go ahead and I'll just put a link to the site so they can go ahead and get access to those. So thank you for providing that. And given the uncertainty in the global markets right now, what would you say are some of the top reasons that someone, like, say, over the age of 55 should consider shifting some of their investments into precious metals right now?
Well, a couple of them we've already spoke about, Social Security. If you think that Social Security is going to increase in value at the rate you need it to have some sort of great retirement, you might want to rethink that just a little bit, because I think as more and more of this comes out about Social Security, we'll really find the day that, or the year that, hey, we're really going to run out of money here, so we need to do a few things here. So I think that's one. I think inflation is a big one. The government needs to print money each and every year. They're going to continue to do that, either larger or smaller, but they're going to print money. And if that's the case, then inflation is going to be here, and you need some sort of hedge against that inflation. And gold's, like I said, been one of the best inflationary hedges, with a 90% correlation with inflation for over 5,000 years. I think the markets are very unpredictable right now. You've got tariffs, you've got wars, you've got a bunch of bickering back and forth with countries. You've got markets that are sky high. Any little spark in those things could be another 2008. So from a diversification standpoint, just diversify 5, 10, 15, 20% of your portfolio, depending on where you are, into something like precious metals or hard assets that don't have the kind of volatility that, some of these other markets could potentially have. And I say, but just lastly, I think, you're kind of running out of time when you're 55 years old. What are you looking to do? Most people are kind of moving from making money to, I want to make sure that I have my money. I've accumulated this money. I still want to grow it, but I want to make sure that I don't lose it. I mean, losing it's almost more important than, hey, I need to make a lot more, because you're starting to get close to that retirement age. And so you want more conservative, type of investments in your portfolio. So that's what we typically see is, as you get older, then the more conservative type of investments start coming into the portfolio. You don't have your earning power to keep ahead of the rate of inflation. So it's kind of this, you get this two-pronged type of situation with gold. It's going to be there in safety, but it's also going to keep ahead of the rate of inflation. So those to me are the 4 biggest reasons right now that I would consider taking a look at precious metals.
Can you share some success stories of clients who have invested with you guys in precious metals at Lear Capital?
Yeah. A lot of people are very private about their investments. I think the biggest success story that everybody, publicly can look at is, Glenn Beck. He's a very well-known radio and TV personality. He invested with us way back when he started his career in 1999. He has quadrupled his money. He publicly talks about this investment with Lear almost every day on his radio show.
Wow.
And it works so well for him that, we agreed that, hey, look, you can be one of our, he's our biggest spokesperson. I think what it also shows is just, hey, how long has Lear been in business? It was all the way back to 1997. We're one of the longest, tenured physical precious metals companies out there. And hopefully people understand we know what we're doing. We picked a metal a long time ago that he's done very, very well with. We've diversified his portfolio over time. He's made other, large transactions with us. And, you go online and hit Google and look at our 5-star reviews. There's over 3,200. So yeah, and we're really proud of our track record, and hopefully we can continue that. And I believe over the next couple of years, gold's going to shine.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, hey, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you again, Kevin, for coming on. I appreciate it. You have invaluable insight to what's going on today, helping out our viewers. And if you're considering bolstering your investment portfolio with gold or silver, I just want to let you know that you can learn more about these precious metals, how to protect your financial future. You can give Kevin and his team a call at 1-800-411-2430, or you can visit learram.com. We're going to have links to the free guides that he has made available. So don't forget to check those out. And this is also free opportunity exclusively to the listeners. So remember, this is not just about investing, but it's ensuring your peace of mind in these turbulent times. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. God bless. And again, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.